Welcome to the Nonprofit SideKick podcast. Changing the world is hard work, and nonprofit leaders are wearing all the hats while herding all of the cats, and it can get really lonely. You could use a sidekick.
We think of ourselves as your partners in mastering the unique balancing act of nonprofit leadership. Our goal is to provide insights, coaching, and direction for nonprofit leaders, both the heart and soul of nonprofit leadership and the nuts and bolts of nonprofit management. We're your hosts, Wendy Bertner
and Stephanie Masters. Welcome back to another episode. Today's episode is going to introduce the CliftonStrengths Assessment and how Nonprofit SideKick leverages this with both executive directors and with boards. So CliftonStrengths, if anyone has not heard of this assessment before, it's done by Gallup and it's focused on positive psychology. So when psychologists were focusing in on what was wrong with people, there were a group of psychologists that were like, why are we doing that? Why don't we just focus on what normal people are doing and how they engage in their lives and how do they get to a place where they get to thrive? So the CliftonStrengths assessment is made up of 177 pairings, and you have 20 seconds to answer each question. And the reason why they do that is because you have to give top of mind responses. If it takes you more than 20 seconds, you're formulating who you think you want to be versus who you are. So it's something that we use within Nonprofit SideKick to really help leaders understand who they are, how they lead, where they naturally can lean into what it means to lead and manage an organization, and also recognize where they need help and support.
Yeah, and we use it with individuals, like you said, the executive director or a board chair, or even individuals in staff, below the executive director level, exactly like that. But we also use it with teams or groups of people. How does that work?
So with individuals, the first thing that we do is we look at recognizing really the elements of emotional intelligence. So the 5 elements of emotional intelligence are self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skill.
So does CliftonStrengths measure that?
It does.
Okay.
It does. So when you read through the report, what it'll tell you or what are your tendencies towards how you build relationships, how you handle stress. Do you prefer to meet people one-on-one? What happens when you're in stressful situations versus when you're in sort of a relaxed state? And it also gives you what they call the help and hinder language. So how do you actually utilize this as a strength, or where could there be overuse where your intention and your impact don't match? And people are like, wow, that's obnoxious. Don't do that again.
And I've seen Steph work her magic. She didn't mention that she's a certified CliftonStrengths coach. And we often coach people together. And I've seen her work her magic where she goes through the CliftonStrengths and you just see the person's eyes light up, or there's all these aha moments like, oh, that's me. That's me. I mean, Amber was hilarious. She was pounding on the table like, how do you know me so well?
And what we have seen is that it is transformational for leaders. So we talked a little bit about the individual, but where the true power of this happens within nonprofit is so many boards are made up of, all right, you were a CEO, so you are going to provide us with executive direction. I was in HR, so I'm going to just give HR advice, which nobody wants, by the way. And then, you have somebody that works in banking, so they have to be the treasurer. And it's this really narrow lens in which we're evaluating talent and what people can provide to a board or to a team. So the way that we leverage the CliftonStrengths Assessment is that we create team grids, and the team grids really introduce the 4 different domains of leadership that CliftonStrengths has. So there's the executing domain. So quick overview, executing domain, they're the doers. They don't want to talk about it a whole lot. They have to have a goal. They want to understand where the goal is going to take them and stop talking. I want to go do the thing. Then we have the influencing domain. The influencing domain is about creating this shared vision and this energy And what it does is it rallies people around to be able to understand what are we doing, why are we doing it, and really infusing that purpose piece. And it's actually the least represented out of all of the domains. Most people fall in executing or the other two. So influencing, if you sit within this domain, you're the unicorn. The third domain is the relationship building domain. And this means that not just focusing on groups, but individuals. So people who sit within this domain are people who like to build relationships one-on-one, where they get to understand what the commonality is, or they have harmony, which means that they want people to work cohesively together, or individualization, understanding how your unique traits match with mine. And so this domain is really critical in terms of any team, whether it's a board or staff. And then the fourth domain is all about information. It's called the strategic thinking domain. And within this domain, it's about what information do I need? How is it laid out? Am I paying attention to what happened in the past or the future? And then am I able to build a plan? And am I able to be creative? So I wanted to explain a little bit what the four domains are, because that's how we leverage it with boards, is we take a look at what the board grid is, where people are mapped in terms of the four domains. And then we start to have conversations about, well, if everyone's in the executing domain, we may not have a strategic plan, or we may not have the right vision and mission that we're talking about with funders, volunteers, people that we want to recruit. Or relationship building, if that's missing, it's just a free for all. You have feral people running around and doing whatever they want to do, and we don't, not getting aligned. And there's just competing time and resources for what needs to happen.
So I want to back up for a second. I'm kind of interviewing you in this episode because you're just so
I'm going to
great
go
at
with
this. Yes. So I know you have my strengths in front of you somewhere there. If you were do a quick overview, and feel free to all warts and all, because I just want people to hear like what they might hear once they take the test and they talk to you or a CliftonStrengths certified coach. What you don't just get a report and go with it. You get some advice as well. It's not like a Cosmo test.
No. My phrase is not a bubblegum cosmopolitan.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can go through what your top 5 are and what my top 5 are. So when we started our partnership, we sat down and we had this great conversation. So you have arranger, relator, ideation, maximizer, and individualization. So you have 2 in the relationship building domain. You have 1 in the influencing domain and 1 in the executing. So you're really well-rounded. So you have representation in all of them.
My mother would be proud.
Yeah. You've managed the unique balancing act of strengths.
Right.
I am communication, arranger, responsibility, learner, and discipline. And so hilariously, I sit more in the executing domain. And as an HR professional, people would, I think, be a little upset that I don't have a lot in the relationship building. But the way that I build relationships is showing how I can guide, support, advocate for people to get things done.
Yes. And you do that really well.
And you and I have arranger in common, but the way that you use it and the way that I use it are completely different. So your arranger and your maximizer work together. So arrangers are individuals who can look at people, resources, time, goals, and they are able to naturally look at how to leverage all of those really effectively. And then what you also have is maximizer. So you're going to get the most out of each of those. And that it's never fully done. Like if you always have more time, there's always one more iteration that you're going to fix, which is something that is a complementary strength to me, because I will do it and then I'm done. I want to walk away from it. It's like I did my first run at this, and then all I do is I tag you, hey Wendy, take a look at this, and then you run with it
until the last minute.
until 11:59 p.m.
Yep.
when it's due at midnight.
Yep. Pretty much. Can't stop looking at it. Can't stop making it better.
But every single time you do that, it gets better with each iteration of what you do, which is something that I really appreciate.
I would like to think so. But I've been teaching the same class, the Executive Director Boot Camp, for 8 or 9 years now, twice a year. And it changes every time. The presentation changes every time. I can't help myself. I would like to stop that because it would be more efficient if I just, use the same presentation.
But you're always about process improvement, which is something that
Yes,
we both have in common. Yours is maximizer, mine is restorative. So it's never 100% done.
What's the difference between that now? Mine's maximizer, yours is restorative. What does that mean?
So maximizer, you're going to continue to work on it forever, and I'm going to work on it until I feel like it's done, and then I walk away.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. So I will say, this was the problem. I'm going to fix the problem. And then I walk away, and then you look at it and say, okay, this isn't really done. There could be some more improvements. And then you make it even better and stronger.
Okay. All right. That makes sense to me.
Yeah. So the best way for us to leverage this with either executive directors or boards is going through their top 5 report first. So everybody can read. I mean, they can read through and look at what the paragraphs say. But the true power is talking about who they are, what their role is, what are the things that people are currently focusing on and where they want to go, then rereading the paragraphs and doing a deeper dive to really identify, all right, what am I already leveraging? What is intuitive for me? And then now what's been brought to light and into focus for me to spend my time and attention on next.
So you mentioned the paragraphs, and I've heard you say this more than once. They're never the same for different, like if I have a ranger and you have a ranger, it's most likely 2 different paragraphs. So it's not, again, but going back to like the Cosmo test, it's not like, oh, you're a ranger, therefore, and here are the same words. How do they do that?
So what the algorithm for the assessment is, there's 177 pairings. You have 20 seconds to answer the questions. And for each of us, the way that we answer those, how the full 34 strengths fall out, influences what your arranger paragraph says versus what mine says. So you are more of a creative on the front end of this, and you pay more attention to how individuals fit into a group. I focus more on, well, what's the process? What's the framework? What do we have to work with? And I really like statements of process. I really like to know what's expected. Where you are, I'm going to see where this goes. I'm going to pay attention to the dynamic of the group and then chart the course.
Yes. Spot on. Again, as always.
Yeah. So we've talked about the overview. So I think the next piece of this is an enhancement that the Gallup organization just started in, I think, the end of June, beginning of July. And that is the powerful partnerships.
I love this one. I love this report.
Yeah. So I actually brought a copy of ours to share with everyone. And the way that the report is laid out is, it first has the 2 individuals that you're doing the powerful partnership with. And each page goes through, first starting with you, what your top 5 are. And it talks about what you bring to the partnership, which I think is really critical. And it gives a common language that you can leverage with either other team members or with the board. And then it also talks about what I need. And I think that empowering people to talk about what their needs are, I think we make so many assumptions because we're all running 100 miles an hour that we think we understand what the other person needs. And this gives a common language as a conversation starter to help create that foundation for a really meaningful partnership, where not only do we understand what individuals bring to the table, but then how do we work together?
We talk a lot about running partners on a mission and how the board chair and the ED or the CEO really have to have that mentality, and it has to extend out to staff and board from there. And this tool, I think, just is so helpful for that.
It is. It cuts through a lot of the guessing game and trying to figure out what to say and how to say it. This opens the conversation where you can get to, well, what do you need? Okay, we're going into a strategic plan, or we're going into budget season and we have to look at what we need to do. This helps have a truly strategic conversation where I understand the lens in which you're going to look at the task and how I look at it. And then how do we work together and ask the questions to be able to make sure that both of our needs are met. And it also broadens the view of how we do the work that we're doing.
Yeah, it answers questions that I don't even know to ask.
Yeah.
Like when I look at that report and I look at what you bring, what you need, like I wouldn't know to ask some of those questions. And that there were several aha moments like, okay, I could do better at this, or this is how I need to communicate better. And you see this all the time with EDs and board chairs, because board chairs tend to be there for a year or two and then go, and the ED is there for longer, and they have to keep building relationships. And to have a tool like this that is almost like instant, you get over that pause to ask awkward questions, or, who wants to ask, so how do you best communicate? That's just weird. Like, who answers that?
What's going to annoy the crap out of you?
Everything. But that's beside the point, Steph. But yeah, exactly. Like it just answers those questions that either you don't know to ask, or you really can't ask that question. It's a little weird.
And I think the power of this that we've seen is where there's been natural tension between an ED and a board chair.
Yes.
And they're just stuck in this, you're being obstinate for the sake of being obstinate.
Yeah.
And it causes us to pause and reflect and say, you're not being obstinate. There's either information or a different way of connecting with you that's going to be more effective. So, some of the board chairs that we've worked with have the best of intentions and really feel like they're helping the ED, and, oh, look at all of this stuff I'm doing to support you. And the ED's like, I can't stand you. You're micromanaging. You're in my grill. Stop it. And so it's intention and impact. And so Clifton Strengths really provides a lens in, here I think I'm being helpful, or I'm trying to be helpful. And sometimes I am, and sometimes I'm not. So, and this just helps minimize a lot of the conflict and the assumptions that people make.
I've been 30 years in the nonprofit sector, and we talk a lot about doing a board matrix. And that would typically be a table where you have board members' names on the left column, and then across the top for each row, you have a different characteristic or skill, like you were saying, HR, marketing, legal. Sometimes you can include age, because you might want to have a diversity of age. You might want to have a diversity of backgrounds or races too, whatever kind of things, geographic, whatever kind of things are important for you. But those are kind of the nuts and bolts of putting a board together, of creating a board, developing a board. The team grid brings in the heart and soul, and it is a second, and in some ways more powerful tool, because it really gets into how is this team going to work. So talk a little bit more about how the team grid, what that looks like, how it's similar to a matrix. It just has some different rows across the top.
It does. So it takes the nuts and bolts grid one step further to allow individuals to say, all right, I'm a banker, but I'm also a creative. And so I don't necessarily just want to be the treasurer, but maybe I want to work in program development or event development or fundraising. There was the first time that we did this was 2 years ago with a board, and one of the board members that we met with kept saying, I don't have the money to just outright give, $5,000-$10,000 to the organization. And so the way that he was looking at it was, this is the only way that I can help the organization. Right. We went through his Clifton Strengths, and what we saw is that he really did sit in the influencing domain, where he could tell stories, like compelling stories to potential funders. and he was really great at bringing people together. And he had an aha moment after we went through his report where he, came back and he said, "Oh, there's all of these other things that I can do." And the next thing that we know is he coordinated a golf outing with a bunch of individuals that he knew were looking to either invest or give to an organization. And he was able to tell these amazing stories about, the clientele that the organization served. And he actually, I think it was like $16,000 that he was able to
Yeah.
raise from the just this half day golf outing that he hosted with the people that he had influence with. And so that's what we're talking about. Like the board grid, the team grid is empowering people to say, all right, the traditional way that I'm looking at this doesn't work for me, but I have these other ideas. And are we empowering and creating the space for people to engage in the best way possible to not only achieve the goals of the organization, but actually exceed them?
Yeah, I like that you used empowering there, um, because I know I've been on boards and I've been a treasurer, and even myself thinking like, well, maybe I shouldn't comment on this because it's more creative. It's about the logo or the branding or something. Because I like you stay in your lane. But I think having the Clifton Strengths grid allows everybody to see that everybody has a little bit of everything. You should all be part of every discussion too, and bring your whole self to that board, not just the piece that the label you've been given.
Right. Um, and one of the other pieces of the board grid that I think is critical for us to talk about is you and I have a strength in common. We both have a ranger. So making sure that doesn't limit how we have the conversation, because the way that I leverage it and the way that you leverage it are completely different. So Clifton Strengths is a great opening for much deeper conversation, that we're not labeling people and we're not limiting how people use these. It's more about, okay, you and I have this one in common. What does yours say? What does mine say? Let's have a conversation about it. And it could actually end up being a complementary partnership, even though it comes from the same strength.
Yeah, and I think ours did for sure.
Oh yeah. So today we've talked about what the Clifton Strengths Assessment is and what it isn't. We've talked about the power of powerful partnerships, making sure that we're learning about one another, having conversations. What does it mean to us? What are we already aware of? We even shared a little bit about emotional intelligence, which again is the self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skill, which is all outlined within your top 5 report. And then we talked about the differences between the powerful partnerships, and then what the board grids with the 4 domains of leadership can mean. And so this is a great instrument to use with teams if you're really looking to look at how you could be more efficient and effective and build these really amazing partnerships and relationships. Clifton Strengths is a fantastic instrument to use.
Yeah, thanks for giving us that background. We wanted to bring this up early in the podcast because we will most likely be referencing it quite a bit. We use it with almost all of our clients, and we really just truly believe in it and think it's an important tool.
And this is a part of the unique balancing act of executive director leadership within the nonprofit space. Thanks so much for joining us today. If you need more information or would like to work with us, check out our website at nonprofit.sidekick.com.